Imagine transforming a stunning design into a fully functional app in just minutes using the power of AI. No more wasted hours writing repetitive template code from scratch. Instead, focus on the exciting and complex logic that brings your projects to life. In this video, you'll learn how to transform a real estate Figma design into a fully responsive and functional application with the help of Locofy, an AI tool that turns designs into production-ready code. We'll use Next.js 13 and Tailwind CSS to create a 2-page masterpiece covering search, properties by area, latest properties, contact section, and a full properties list with pagination and filter layouts. And all of that, of course, is completely responsive. The true magic lies in our secret weapon, AI. AI tools are built to support developers to ship websites faster and not to compete with you. With AI, you can seamlessly convert your design into production-ready code, effortlessly switch between JavaScript and TypeScript, adapt to your preferred styling framework, such as Tailwind, CSS modules, Material UI, or Design. And if you ever need to switch libraries, you can transition between React, Next.js, Vue, and even React Native in a single click. And the best part, you'll be up and running in no time. I'll personally walk you through the step-by-step process of using AI to set up your project and automatically break it into reusable components. Once AI generates your code, you can sync it to a new GitHub repository or export it as a zip file. That's going to allow you to use what AI provided and then add as many additional features as you want. And deploying your masterpiece to platforms like Netlify or Vercel, it's simpler than ever. Hey, it almost sounds too good to be true, right? Are we going to use a no-code tool? Absolutely not. It's a low-code tool built to support developers to ship apps faster. And to prove this point, we'll take our app a step further and integrate Supabase to dynamically fetch the list of properties. Just imagine the endless possibilities. Now, you may be wondering, what prerequisites do I need to get started? The answer is simple. Nothing, none at all. We provide all the tools that you need, and everything is completely free to use. Together, we'll start from scratch, and I'll guide you every step of the way towards success. So, get ready for a transformative journey that will not only enhance your skills as a developer, but also impress potential employers with a remarkable project in your portfolio. The power of AI is at your fingertips, waiting to unlock your true potential. With that said, let's dive right into the project. This time, we won't start from our Visual Studio Code. Rather, we're going to start straight from the Figma design. So in the description down below, you can find a link to this design, and you can open it up on your screen just so we're on the same page. Once you do that, you'll have to duplicate this design to your drafts by clicking this arrow on top and then duplicate. Once you do that, you should be able to see the same screen as before, but now with edit access, which means that you can install some plugins. So simply right-click right here on the screen, go to Plugins, find More Plugins, and then search for Locofy. You'll be able to see a Locofy free beta and simply click Run. This is going to open up a new small window on top of your design asking you to connect your Locofy account. Then you can create an account. And once you register, you'll have to answer a couple of questions, which is going to take less than a minute, and then you'll be connected, which means that now your Figma and Locofy accounts are connected. So let's simply head back to our Figma design and start using the plugin. Inside of here, you'll now see a different screen. You'll first be able to go through a series of explanation videos where you can learn what Locofy is all about. But thankfully, you're watching this video right now, so you don't have to go through those, so simply click Got It. Here, you can select your project. In case you created one at the start, that's fine, but we're going to create a new one soon. Here, you'll be able to follow the steps. In total, we have about 7 to 8 steps to finalize our application. The first step is to optimize the design. Then we'll be able to tag some elements in step 2. In step 3, you'll be able to edit the styling and the layout. In step 4, we can add some actions to make things work. Then we'll be able to view our live prototype at all times and even export the code from the Locofy Builder. So let's get started. First, we'll need to create a new project. In this case, I'm going to call it JSM Real Estate. And I'm going to choose a framework, Next.js. Then immediately you can choose from a lot of options regarding your project. You can choose between TypeScript and JavaScript. For now, I'm going to select JavaScript to show you how easy it is later on to switch back to TypeScript. You can choose the styling method. In this case, we're going to use Tailwind, but CSS modules, style components, and even CSS in JS is also supported. You can choose your preferred units. I'm going to use pixels and kebab case, and we can click Create. And finally, we are ready to start going through these Locofy steps. So let's click Fix on the Optimize Design step. Here, immediately you can choose between 2 frames because this design contains 2 pages, as you might have seen once you first opened it up. So let's go with the first page first. Click Optimize. Here, it's going to immediately show you some optimizations for the Figma design, which is great right out of the box. The design structure is good, but then we'll have to apply the auto layout. So in this case, we have 2 options for responsiveness. So let's go ahead and view what those do. Let's click View Fix Options. And this is pretty cool. So we can move this Locofy plugin to the right side, and we can explore what's happening with the design. So here, they are applying a fill container to all the children elements. So if I click it, you can see how it applies it to some of the elements on the page, specifically on the header. But if we try it out a bit, you can notice it's great for mobile devices, but if you expand it, it doesn't really fit to the rest of the screen, which is how it should be on the design. So in this case, unfortunately, we won't use the fill container because we prefer it right out of the box. So we can click back. Then we have the properties row, and here it's going to suggest to fix this little row by applying the space between or applying the fill container. But we can notice that both options don't really work because there's some weird spacing happening right here. So I prefer to keep it as it is, just like this. So for now, we can click back. So in this case, everything looks good, so we can click Done with this screen. We can now do the same thing for the other page. Click Optimize. And here, it gives us some options for the cards. But again, if you try it out, you're going to see that it loses some spacing between the top and the bottom of the card, which we need to have. So it's not ideal. I prefer it to keep it as it is. So once again, I'm going to go back and click Done with this screen. And that finalizes both of the screens, which means that we can say Done Fixing Designs, which essentially means that we're done with the first step because the design was already optimized to its maximum. That means that now we can move to the second step, which is tagging interactive elements. Everything in Figma is just a rectangle with some text within it. If you look at this button right here, it's not really a button, even though it might look like that. So if you open it up, you can see that it is just some kind of tabs container. And then here, this is a rectangle with a text of rent, but it's not really a button, and Figma cannot know that it is. So by tagging interactive elements, we can give them some meaning. So let's click Tag. And here, you'll be able to do a couple of things. You can use auto tag, which is going to provide you with tagging suggestions, which you can approve, or we can do manual tagging. Let's give it a shot with auto tag and see what it figures out. AI is 100% sure that this button is a match, so we're going to definitely accept this. Then it asks you to select a UI library. In this case, we don't need any. And you can even add some additional attributes or basic attributes to this button. But in this case, we can simply click Done. The sale is also a button, so I'm going to accept that. And the sale, you can also choose a UI library, and you can even select a variation of that button. In this case, I'm simply going to go back to none and then mark it as done. And then you can go through a couple of these. We can accept another button and tag all the elements. For example, these images, the share images, are not really inputs. So this here is a mistake. But of course, as with AI, nothing is 100% sure. So we can accept only those that we manually believe are true and that are correctly tagged. This is the beauty of AI, because people think it's going to replace developers. Well, not yet. It is just here to help us make faster decisions and have all of these auto-tagged. So now we can go back to home and then go back to the second step. We'll have to still manually tag a couple of things. So let's do that right away. First, you need to select a frame that we want to tag. For example, let's go for this search button. I'm not sure if we selected it before. You have to go a couple of levers deep. And yes, we already auto-selected it as a button. That's great. Now let's check out these drop-down elements. So I'm going to select your city, and you can see that it is a drop-down that already has some values added right here, which is pretty cool. This is an interactive preview. So if I right here go and choose that this is an add design dropdown, you can even change the style of that dropdown. It can look like this, or it can be a basic link. Then what you can also do is see the preview live and even add some options, such as New York. Let's do Los Angeles as well. And now if you hover over it, believe it or not, you can see the output of the code live. This is pretty cool. Not only that, I'm going to show you something on a bigger design right here, properties by area. So let's select Centerville right here. You can not only select it as a button, but as a link that's going to point to a specific page. And then we can point it to a different page with a different URL even, or just automatically link to a different Figma page, such as this one. So for example, once we click on this, in the code later on, it's going to immediately know that this is going to point to that other page, which is pretty cool. Not only that, now we can preview the entire thing in this huge window. So keep in mind, here we had only the design, right? But this right here is not the design. This is the actual live code. As you can see, it is responsive. Well, we're going to make it more responsive later on, but this is the real code. If you hover over it, you can see the actual dropdown, and you can also click on this link, which is going to point you to the different page. This is huge because you have a live testable application that you can test how it behaves on different devices right here within your Figma without doing any code. How cool is that? Now we can close this by clicking back to home, and we can go back to tag, and then you can keep tagging other things. But of course, we have to close the preview to be able to tag them. So now, of course, you can repeat the procedure for everything else. You can link all of these cards to different pages, just to point there, and then it's going to immediately work within your code. So let's select card 3. Let's go ahead and select it as a link, and then link to a page. And I think you get the gist, right? You have the ability to tag different things to do different stuff. So this is going to be a link, and finally the last one, a link going to the same page. Now you can also go through these properties by area, and you have these read more buttons. So if you go all the way down to it, it's currently just a text element, but you can make it into a button that's going to have a no UI library, and that is it. So you turned it from a text element, from a p tag to a button. And you can repeat this for every single other read more. And I hope you get the point of it, right? It is incredibly intuitive. You just go through different things and tag things manually. But of course, as AI advances, the AI auto tagging feature is going to be so much better, so it will be able to do most of these things for you automatically. Now, of course, if we want our app to work fully, you'll have to link these two to do something. I think this button got already linked automatically. Yep, that's correct. And then same thing for these buttons. And finally, the contact form. So let's see how we can tag a specific input. Let's go all the way to the first name. And currently it's just an element. So let's go ahead and turn it into an input. Let's select none. And you'll see a configuration for the name, ID, value, etc. You can select type of text. You can select 100 as the max length and 2 as the min length. And you can check the required box. It is as simple as that. And now if you click preview, again, we're going to get this huge window and it's going to preview the actual field. So if you go here, you can now start typing. And I do believe it's going to be required. Right now, the submit button is not doing anything, but later on we can hook it up. And in the live preview, you should already see first name is required. So now let's close the preview and let's repeat the procedure for other fields as well. I mark this as down. And yeah, this is now a live input. We can repeat the procedure for last name. It's also going to be an input. We're going to make it required. And click done. We can now go to the email and tag. We have to go all the way to the email field and then mark it as an input. None. Type email. Required as well. Click done. And finally, comments or questions is also an input, but rather this is a text area. So we can select a text area and we can do rows 10. It's also going to be required. Finally, we can tag the submit button. So right here, it is already tagged as I can see as a submit button. So now if we preview this entire form, as I told you, we should be able to see exactly what it's going to look like on the finished website. So here, if I click submit, it's not doing anything. It's going to look exactly as it does on the finished website. So you can start typing something and that's it. Of course, you cannot submit it yet, but this is it. It's pretty cool to see that you can test your inputs live in here and also see how it behaves on different screen sizes. Let's close the preview. And with this, we're pretty much done with tagging the elements on the first page. There might be a couple of things we need to tag on the second page. So right here, we can tag this default order. So let's go to tag, select the default order. And this is going to be a dropdown. And I think it already has some values in it. If not, you can simply add them right here, separated by commas. Great. We can mark this as done. And now everything is set to move to the next step. Step 1 and 2 are done. One thing we can do to just really mark them as done is go back into step 1, go into a page, and just ensure to mark the step as dismissed. So if you go to the page 1 and click optimize, you can select these two options that it recommends and then simply click ignore. This is going to let Locofy know that we've seen these options, but we don't necessarily need them right now, and you can click done and repeat that for the second page as well and click done fixing design. Now we are on step 3, which is editing, styling, and layout. And here you'll be able to customize different media queries and states, like adding hover effects and configure styles based on certain breakpoints to make your design responsive. So let's click edit. And as you can see, you have different options to choose from, and you can add specific styles to specific elements based on those options. So what we can do is we can go back to latest properties for rent right here, which is right here. You can select this entire container and you can click preview. In the preview, you can see that the cards are overflowing. So they're not appearing nicely in the screen on smaller devices. That's not responsive, but it's also not a problem. So what we can do is we can select this complete frame by exiting the preview. We might need to select the container where the cards are. So that means this one right here. Once you select this container, you can go right here to where it says fixed on top right, and then move it to fill container. If you click that and then go back to preview, you'll be able to see how that interacts with the code. So now we go back to the latest properties and check this out. It's actually moving them, and because of the Figma properties, they are appearing nicely one below another, even to complete mobile responsiveness. Great. So we can close the preview and we're done with this. Next, we have to fix our navbar. So if we go right here, you can notice that now we have both the links as well as the hamburger menu, which you don't want to have, right? You want to have the hamburger just on mobile devices. So what we can do is you can select the hamburger icon, go all the way to it, and then you can simply hide it on devices larger than 1200 pixels. And then on desktop and smaller, you can simply go to show. Okay, so now if we click done, and if you go to preview, you should be able to see that now we cannot see it. But if we just go smaller, you can see it appear right here. But now we don't want to see both the hamburger as well as the links. So now let's target these links, which is the navigation right, and then only the links within it, and then go to edit styling and layout. And this time it's going to be opposite. So for large devices, we want to keep it showing, but for desktop and lower, we want to simply hide the links. So you can click done, you can go to preview, and now on large devices, we only see the links. But if you go to a smaller desktop or tablet or a phone, you can only see the hamburger menu. This is pretty cool that you can test it right here within your Figma. That's great. So now let's close the preview. And in this step, we now have been messing with the layout, but we can also focus on changing the styling. So let's click edit and let's select the search button, this one right here. Go all the way down to it. There we go. And you can change different normal, hover, pressed, or disabled states as well. So let's select hover and go to the styling section. So here we have displays, layouts, flex, and then we have the styling options. So in this case, we can change the design from something like 4A60A1 to something like 404 F7B. It's just a different shade of blue. You can do the same thing for all the other buttons, but also for all the other elements depending on different states, such as the screen size, hover, disabled, and so on. Now, the cool thing is that you can immediately preview those changes because this is not only the design. I have to keep repeating myself because this is so cool. It's the actual code. So now if you hover over it, you can see it actually works. And just to remind you, these links that we've done before actually work as well. So they navigate you to different pages. Pretty cool stuff. I'm going to close the preview. And with that, we have done our step 3. Of course, you're free to keep playing with it, keep testing it out, keep changing the responsiveness even more and changing different styling elements of different buttons. You're here to learn how easily you can generate all of this code using Locofy. As a final test, I guess we can do one final preview, switch to a mobile device, and just see if everything is looking good. So here, everything falls nicely in one line. Remember these cards, we fixed them before. This is looking good. And yep, that is it. Everything is completely mobile responsive right out of the box. Wonderful. Now let's check the same thing for the second page just to be 100% sure. So I'm going to go all the way up, click on a card, and now switch to a mobile device. And here as well, everything is looking great. That means that we are done with step 3 and we can move to step 4, which is adding actions. So now that your designs are responsive and styled, you can move to this step where you'll be adding click actions such as opening URLs, changing pages, and so much more. So in this case, you can click on a specific search button and then you can make it do something like change a page, scroll into view, open a pop-up, or even open an external URL. In this case, we won't be adding many actions, but just so you know, that's possible as well. Now, step 5 is for once we are done with the design portion of our file. It's time to move away from Figma to Locofy Builder. So once you're happy with all of the previews, you want to sync the design to Locofy Builder to view it as code. I'm sure you're interested in seeing how that's going to look like. So simply click sync, and that's going to sync different pages to your project that we created before and allow you to do many different things, such as create reusable components, define props, add scripts and meta tags, use the preview mode, or even export it, sync it with GitHub, and deploy it. So let's go to all frames, and let's simply click View Code in Builder. The syncing process is going to take about a minute, so simply pause this video and let's continue when it's done. Finally, you'll see this View Code in Builder button, so let's click it and check it out. Okay, let's take a tour of Locofy's Builder together. First, we have our project and team collaboration on top. Then, right here, we have the File Explorer on the left side. After that, we have our layers, which are the same layers that we've seen in Figma. And finally, we have GitHub, where you can connect and push your projects to GitHub. Then, in the middle, we have our Design Viewer and Screen tabs, so you can move between different screens. In the bottom, you can view your code, both the Next.js code and the CSS code. And there is our 6th step. We had 7 or 8 steps with the export, and we were left at step 5, if I'm not mistaken. So now we are moving back to step 6, but this time within Locofy's Builder. Step 7 is to configure the code, and step 8 is to sync, export, or deploy it. So let's get started together. Our steps are on the right-hand side, and we can collapse all of the steps in the Locofy plugin and move to the step 6, which is to make components. So right here, we can click Create, and immediately AI found 13 different components. So let's click Review. As you can see, it immediately and correctly recognized that this top component is a header, so we can accept all 2 instances of the header. Then we have the address card, and we can change its component name to property card, and click Accept 12 instances. Then we have a raised container, which actually is just a footer, as you can see right here. Even though it recognized it correctly, it didn't know what to call it. So we can rename it to footer and click Accept 2 instances. We have the Centerville link right here, and that's going to be an area card. So we can call it area card because it shows different locations. We have the home container, which is going to be the info card. So we can rename it to info card. Then we have the Washington container, which is going to be the property rent card. We also have the address container, which is going to be the properties grid container. We have the home finder container, which we can rename simply to hero because it's the hero section, the first thing that the user sees. We have the area properties div, and we can rename this to areas container or area container. And then we have area property container, which is going to be area feature card container, or even simpler, feature container. We have the rent properties container, which is great, and the rent properties form, which we can accept. And finally, the form. So we can call this contact and click accept. And with that, we have accepted all the components, which means that the step 6 is now done. From the layer panel, you can select one of these components, and immediately you can see the top header component, which now includes the code of the header. And you can see it highlighted right here on the landing page. Same thing for the hero. You can immediately see that it is its own hero.js component. One thing that we can do is also create components on our own. So you can select one of the cards and then simply turn that into a component. It's not a component already, which is a pretty cool thing, immediately separating different parts of the code right here through this interface. And for this component specifically, as well as all the other components that have props within them, right here on the bottom right, you can see the prop section. This component has the prop background image, padding, and box sizing, but this just lets you know that you can add as many props as you want right here within Locofy Builder. Definitely a great thing to know for the future because you can instantly shape the way your components take in data. But now that we have some of the components created for us right here, and all of this is looking great, we have different section in the code, it's time to go to step 7, which is to configure the code a bit. So let's click configure. And here you can enter the title tag. In this case, we can go real estate. You can enter the meta description. We can say something like discover your perfect home. Project settings can be between TypeScript and JavaScript. So let me show you how simple it is to switch it between the two. I'm going to pull this a bit up, and here we have JavaScript code. And if I click TypeScript and I click save, check this out. Immediately, it converts it into TypeScript. This one was simple though, right? So let's go back to JavaScript and let's try to find some components that have some actual code that we can use, such as this use callback one in the hero section. So let's click TypeScript and click save. As you can notice, immediately it turned everything into TypeScript. This one has a bit of code, but maybe not too much code. So let's try to find some more interesting ones. Let's see. Yeah, definitely it's going to be the contact section. So in the contact, we have all of these inputs. So what we can do is we can turn this into TypeScript and click save. And in just a couple of seconds, immediately it turns this component into TypeScript. And if you had some actual values and states for these fields, it would convert all of that code into TypeScript with one single click. For now, I'm going to bring it back to JavaScript. You can also modify the styling between Tailwind and immediately move it to, for example, let's do styled components. So if you do that, check this out. It automatically creates all of these components for us, or the styles for them, and we can move back to Tailwind with one single click. That's crazy. From here, you can also uncheck the Memoize on click and click save. Of course, feel free to play with these options if you want. And with that, we're now done with step 6 and 7, and we are ready to export our code. In this video, we're going to sync our code with GitHub. This is going to allow us to clone the repo and run it locally on our machine. So let's choose the sync project option, and it's going to ask you to connect it to GitHub. You can then log in. Once you're in, you can authorize it and click install and authorize. The second step is to either create a new repo or choose an existing one. In this case, we can create a new one. Let's type a repo name, something like real estate _ Locofy. And you can click confirm repo and branch. Now, this is a pretty cool thing. On the left side, you can see your GitHub code, and there's nothing there yet, but on the right side, you can see your code within Locofy Builder. So let's simply click push to GitHub. This process could take a couple of minutes, especially for the first time. So pause this video and I'll be right back. And there we go. Our project has been pushed to GitHub. Later on, we can also look into the smart merging functionalities where you can immediately resolve conflicts between Locofy Builder and your GitHub repo to always be up to date. But for now, let's go to repository. And as you can see, the repo indeed is there, and it is a Next.js 13 application that has the pages folder, and within it, it has two pages, the app.js, which is the homepage, as well as the landing page. And within it, believe it or not, we have our code, exactly as how you would write it, with the import of our globals, CSS. And then if we go back, we have all of our components that were created for us by Locofy. That's pretty cool. I mean, immediately having the header code right here using your preferred styling method, in this case Tailwind, is pretty cool. It simplifies the process significantly, although this is just the front end. So now that we have this repo, we can clone it, run it on our machine, and then continue building it and continue adding additional features. So let's do that right away. To clone your repo, simply click this green code button, and then you can either open it with GitHub Desktop or simply copy this HTTPS clone link. Once you do that, create a new empty folder on your desktop, and let's call it something like real estate. And we can then drag and drop it into our empty Visual Studio Code. Once you're in there, you can go to View and then Terminal. Inside of here, we'll want to clone it. So we can say git clone, and then paste the URL that you just copied from GitHub. Press enter, and you can see it's going to say cloning into real estate Locofy. And we are there. And now we just need to CD into it. So CD real estate Locofy, just like so. And you can see that we now have a folder. And within that folder, we have all the files. If you want to have a cleaner file tree, simply right-click Real Estate Locofy, click Reveal in File Explorer, and then simply drag and drop it within your Visual Studio Code. This is going to open it as a separate folder. And there we go. We already explored our code a bit, but as you can see, this is a complete Next.js application. It even has proper Tailwind config that allows us to extend different colors, font families, board radiuses, and more. And this is exactly how I would write this code, which is one thing that Locofy does really well. It doesn't just return randomly generated AI code. It really tries to achieve that developer look exactly as how we would develop it ourselves. So the file and folder structure is proper with all the icons and images. The pages folder is here with 2 pages, the CSS file, and then finally the components folder. So with that said, let's try to run our application and see if we can actually run it on localhost 3000. So let's open up the terminal and then run npm I to install all of the dependencies, which are within package.json. In this case, we won't have many. We're using &design icons, but of course you can use any other preferred library of choice. And of course there's Next and React. So let's wait until the dependencies get installed and then we can run it. Finally, run npm run dev. This is going to start up our application on localhost 3000 and then simply control click the localhost link. And there we go. Our app is here. Now, you can notice that right now, even though we're on the localhost 3000, which is the root route, we can see the properties and not the homepage. So if we go back to the code, we'll just have to exchange those two. As you can see, the landing page is marked as landing-page.js, which is the actual homepage. But then the index.js, which is the properties folder, is right here marked as index. So we have to exchange these two. And of course, we'll have to make some modifications to ensure that the linking between the two works. But for now, let's simply rename the landing page, or rather just copy its name and rename it to A. The index is going to be renamed to landingpage.js. And then the A is going to be renamed back to index. That way, on the homepage, we now have the actual home, which is great. And we can navigate using the URL bar. So if we go to /landing-page, we should be able to see our properties, which of course is not the best name for this page yet, but don't worry, we're going to focus on fixing all of that together. The most important part right now is that we can actually see that the page 2 as well as the page 1 are right here and look as good as ever. This is great, and keep in mind all of this code was generated by AI. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to go through the code base a bit and try to fix it, try to understand how these components were created, and maybe we can create some even more reusable components. So let's put the browser side by side by the editor and let's check it out. There we go. First, let's focus on fixing up our index.js. I'm going to zoom it out just a bit so everything fits. And you can see that we're importing a lot of these different components, which is good. Then we have our landing page with a head where we have the title of real estate and even a meta description of Discover Your Perfect Home, exactly as we put it within the Locofy Builder. Now, in this case, you're going to notice that the majority of classes look great. They wrap our entire application, such as relative, BG, gray, white, flex, flex call, and so on. But this one stands out a bit. Adding a height of 5,000 pixels, I don't think that's necessary. So we can kind of just remove it and everything is still going to look great. You have to keep in mind this is AI generated, so in some cases we will have to clean some of these things up. Another thing is that you can see that we're passing all of these props to our footer. And these props are basically just links or strings. So there isn't really a reason why we need to pass them there. We can simply remove all of these props and then move into our footer, get rid of them here from props, and simply fix the styles to use the strings within it. There's no reason to pass them as props. So in this case, we also don't need this footer section style, which was created for us. We just need a regular footer that's going to return something. So let's see how we can improve those styles a bit. First, we have this style object, which we don't need. Then we also have things such as on medium devices self-stretch, which we don't need. On medium devices gap 0 as well. Other than that, this should be good. Now we're going to notice that it's going to complain about all of these image IDs, and that's fine. We're going to add them soon enough just by going through the code. Now in this footer tag right here, we also don't need on small devices flex unset, which is going to be right here. And we also don't need self-stretch. These are some styles that were added, but aren't going to change the look and feel of the website. On this div, we don't have to specify the height of 300 pixels. And the rest of the styles we're going to modify later on once we actually fix those sources. So let's fix our first source, which is right here, image IDs. This is going to be an image that's going to have a class name of 1111. We don't need relative here. And we're going to have a source equal to, that's going to be just a string that's going to point to /houseline.svg. If we save it, that's good, but you're going to notice that now we have some other issues. So let's go to line 38 and let's fix the next src. Small image IDs is going to be just /social-media-logo.svg, and we also don't need relative on this image. The next one is going to be on line 45. This is going to be a string of social media logo.svg, but it's going to be logo1, and we have to start with a /. And we can keep this going. We have the next one, which is going to be /social media logo2.svg. You already know the drill. We're going to have a social media logo 3, social media logo 4, and then we have the features. Or no, I think this is it. We have fixed all the props. So now if we go back, or rather down, you can see all of these social media logos appear, and we can even add some additional padding or styling, or just modify the rest of the styles. So now let's go back all the way to the top of the footer, right here. And I don't think we need a height on our div within the footer. So if I fix it, you can notice it's still good. For these divs below, we can also remove relative. We don't want to set a lot of elements to relative positions. We just want to keep them as they are on the page. Also, we can remove almost all instances of self-stretch right here below. We don't need that self-stretch property, which is essentially a line self-stretch, and the h, and we don't need a specific height right here, because that then is going to fix the layout and it's going to provide the regular height. Also, we can remove relative from all the other instances, so you can hold Alt key and then select it and remove it below. Then we have this div right here with a width of 312 pixels, which is here, and we don't necessarily need it. We wanted to take the usual width. Then we have our social media logos, which I do believe look good right out of the box. And then we come to our links, which are here. And in those links, we don't need to have this height, which is set by default. And also, we don't need relative on any of these links. So if we fix it, it's still going to look good. Same thing for the links below. We don't need those heights that are set in stone. We want our app to be dynamic. And we can also remove relative from other places right here. There we go. Same thing for the last one. We can remove the height to make it dynamic, and then remove all instances of relative. So this was a bit of a cleanup, and we also don't need a self-stretch here, as you might know. So yeah, as I said, this was a bit of a cleanup, but as you can see, this is looking great. And now if you want to go ahead and modify this even further, such as changing these into anchor tags and adding hrefs, that is great. You can do that, or change them to native Next.js links. That's great. But we do have the layout for the footer, which is looking good on all devices. And that's all that matters. I notice I'm also zoomed out a bit. So if we reset, it's looking great. And we can go back to the tablet view right here. Wonderful. The reason why I was zoomed out is to still be able to see the regular screen view on this specific width. So yeah, this is great. I hope you can get the point of this. All of this code was generated by AI, which is great. But of course, AI is not going to be an all-in-one solution that's going to replace developers. That's never going to be the case. You will have to go through the code and modify it a bit to make it your own and to actually make these links work and to add additional functionalities. Of course, we could have made these links work before, if you wanted to, immediately from the Locofy plugin on Figma by simply tagging them and adding links and functionalities to them. But in this case, this is good enough for now. So now we can close the footer, and with that, take a look at how clean our homepage looks. We have the head, we have the div, which wraps everything, and then we have all of the different sections of our homepage. This is great. Now, let's go to our second page, which is the landing page right now, which is not the proper name for it. It's actually going to be the properties page. So let's rename it to properties.js, and let's see if we can improve it somehow. First of all, the AI thought it needs a lot of icons, but in this case, it really does not. So we can remove all of these unused imports. There we go. That's looking much cleaner. And it looks like we don't need a button from add design either. The only thing that we have is just a couple of imports, the header, the properties grid, and the footer. As the last time, in the footer, we don't need to pass all of those props because we're using them within it. And this is more or less it. We can go ahead and check out the properties page right here. It's looking great right off the bat, but let's see if we can improve some styling and make it even simpler and better to understand for us as developers. Later on, we're going to implement additional functionalities here, such as fetching the data from Supabase. And that's the main point I want to emphasize. Locofy, which is a low-code tool, has never meant to replace developers. A lot of these AI tools say, hey, it's done for web developers. You can create simple landing pages using other tools, right? But that's not the case, and it never will be. Because with Locofy, you can generate the pages, but then you can come back to the code, and as a professional developer, you can implement additional features. So later down the line in this video, I'm going to teach you how to fetch all of this data from Supabase. With that said, let's focus on simplifying some styling right here. As before, we won't need relative right here. Then below the header, we're going to update the BG top to simply BG top like this. If we save it, it didn't really make a big difference, but this is the right background position top, and this right here isn't. Then we can remove the relative right here from properties, as well as right here from this div. If we save it, everything's going to be the same. So let's move to this larger class name in this div. And here we can remove self stretch. We can also remove padding x0. It doesn't make sense to add it intentionally. And then we can update the LG padding left to 120 pixels. We can also remove the large box border. And we can remove all of these MD properties, as well as these small ones. So it's just going to be like this at the end. And you can notice that this didn't really make any difference. If we expand it, it's looking great. And if we go to mobile, it's looking great as well. In this case, we can remove this width. We don't want to have specific widths. We want to have the width to be kind of modifiable and that it naturally connects to your browser's width. Here, an interesting thing is we can add a flex wrap in this second div right here. That's going to allow us to wrap the elements within it. So it's going to be flex wrap, which is going to make it even more responsive. In this cases, we can remove the relative for these images. Same as for the sort. And here we have dropdown. This dropdown is using overlay, which is deprecated, but thankfully as developers, we know how to update it. Even Visual Studio Code tells us to use the menu right here. So what we can do is we don't have to have a view that looks like this. We can remove everything within the dropdown, just keep the placement and the trigger. But what we can do is we can say menu is equal to, and then items is equal to default order. And this is something that we're going to create right here at the top. So right here, even above the component, we can say const default order is equal to, and for starters, we can leave it as an empty array. Later on, we can modify the default order based on the different parameters within it. Or you know what, we can immediately add. For now, we can leave the default order empty, and later on, we'll be able to switch it based on different properties, such as popular properties, latest properties, or even recommended properties. But for now, it's most important that we have those dropdown, that we have that dropdown working in the new updated way. Below that, we have our properties grid container, to which later on, we're gonna pass dynamic properties, which is pretty cool. And then this is a pretty cool where we have all of this pagination at the bottom. You can see 1, 2, 3, and so on, right? And these are just basic buttons that say arrow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on, right? This doesn't really work. So what we want to do is we want to remove all of these properties. So that's going to be all the way from this div. Everything from within this div that is below properties grid container. So we can select it and go all the way down to here. There we go. Because this was just static data. We want to remove that pagination, and later on, we're going to implement our own pagination. In this case specifically, we're going to use pagination from &design. So we can scroll all the way to the top, and we can import pagination from &d. There we go. And we can scroll down, and we can simply use it. Pagination as a self-closing component. We can set the default current to be equal to 1. And we can also set the total to be 50. Now, if we save this, you can see we have a new pagination, and later on, we can make it functional. Great. So now we've modified all of the styles from our properties page, and we've removed some of the static data that we have. And right away, we can focus on fetching dynamic data from Supabase. That's going to allow you to really see the power of Locofy, because you have this layout generated for you incredibly quickly, and then you can dive right into the code and focus on what matters, which is implementing logic and functionality. So with that said, let's get started. To get started adding functionality to our great UI, you can go to supabase.com. Supabase is an open source Firebase alternative where it allows you to quickly start your projects with a Postgres database, even adding authentication, instant APIs, and more, but primarily we're going to use it for database and storage in this case. So visit database and sign up or sign in if you need to, and then click Start Your Project. Sign in, and once you're here, create a new project. Let's call it something like Locofy Real Estate. Then choose your database password. And of course, remember it. Choose the region and stay at the free pricing plan and click Create Your New Project. The project is being set up as we speak, and they are provisioning our database for us. In the meantime, you don't have to visit the documentation because I'm going to show you everything you need to know to get started. This process should take about 2 minutes, so feel free to pause this video and I'll be right back. After refreshing, we are welcomed to our new project and we can get started by building out our database. Let's choose Table Editor and let's create a new table. We can name it Properties, essentially meaning Real Estate Properties. And we can disable the RLS security just to simplify things to allow us to access the database even simpler. Inside of here, we can add new columns. We're going to keep the ID and created at, but we're going to also add a new column with a name of name and a type of text, and another one with an image. And this image is going to be of a type text as well, or maybe they have a URL. Now we can go for text. And finally, we're going to add a price. The price is going to be an int 8, which is a signed 8-byte integer. And we can click Save. Now, let's get some real estate properties into our table. You can go to Insert, and then click Import Data from CSV. In the GitHub gist down below, you'll be able to find a CSV file that's going to contain all of the demo properties that we're going to add. So just go there, copy it, and paste it right here. As you can see, this is going to import 7 different properties. And finally, we can click Import Data. Immediately, 7 rows are going to be added to our properties, and we'll be able to utilize them from within our application. The next thing we have to do is install Supabase. So stop the terminal from running by pressing Ctrl+C and then Y. Then clear it and run npm install add supabase /supabase-js. And this took less than a few seconds. So now we can rerun our application and collapse the terminal. So let's see how we can get this data from the database into our application using Supabase. We first have to import, right here at the top, a create client, which is coming from add supabase /supabase-js. Then we can use it by saying const client is equal to create client, and we need to pass 2 different things, the Supabase URL and the Supabase key. So let's see where we can get those from within our application. We can go to our project settings, API, and then here is our project URL. So we don't want to simply put it here, but rather we want to put it to our environment variables. So let's create a new .env file, and there we can say next _ public _ URL. And that's going to be equal to this URL. And we can also do a similar thing for the key by saying next _ public _ key, and we can copy it from here and then paste it there. Now we can go back and we can use those environment variables by saying process .env .next _ public _ URL, comma process.env .next _ public _ key. Of course, these relate to the Supabase URL and the key. Now that we have the client, we can actually fetch the properties. And we can do that by creating a new use effect hook. So let's say use effect. And we want to, of course, give it a callback function that is right here, as well as a dependency array. We're going to fetch it only at the start. And there we can create a new function called const fetch properties, which is an async function, like so. From within it, we want to say const result is equal to await client.from properties. And then we can do .select, which is going to be everything. As simple as that. And then we can create a new use state field where we can call it properties and set properties at the start equal to an empty array. Finally, we can say set properties is equal to result.data. And then below, we can immediately call the fetch properties right within our use effect. Okay, and the last thing we have to do is actually use those properties from within our code. So to do that, we can go all the way here to our properties grid container, and to it, we can pass all properties prop, which is equal to properties. And later on, within the properties grid container, we'll be able to replace the dummy data with the new data. So right now, let's see. I think we have to import the use effect from React. So let's do that. We can say import use effect from React. And if we save it and go back, we can see that the use state is also not imported. So let's import useState alongside useEffect. And we are back. So as you can see, now we still have the dummy data, but we can go all the way down to our properties grid container and start modifying this component to use the real data because we're passing it as all properties coming directly through props. So let's focus on that next. We can expand this just a bit so everything fits in one line nicely. There we go. And we can focus on implementing the layout. As you can see, currently we're using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different cards, and they're all simply repetitively typed right here. But we want to delete all of that. So let's simply delete them. And in here, we're going to map through all of our properties. So we can say all properties dot map, where we're going to get each individual property, and then we're going to instantly return something. And that something is going to be a property card component, a self-closing component that's going to accept a key equal to property.id. Then it's going to accept an image URL equal to property.image, just like so. Then a name equal to property.name. And finally, a price equal to property.price. Great. Now, if we save this, of course, you'll be able to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different properties, exactly how many we have in our table, which means that everything is properly being fetched and our connection to Supabase is done in the right way. But now, our next task is going to be to modify our properties grid and then to modify the card to properly show the data. So in this case, we can look into our inner div and we can change the gap 8 to 12 to give it some more space. And we can also add a PX, meaning padding horizontal, of 2.5. That's going to just make it fit more nicely on larger devices. If we zoom it in, yep, this is our card. And now we are ready to dive into the property card component and see what we can do with it. In this case, we don't need any of these properties that we are accepting here. We just need the new props that we are going to pass, which is going to be the image URL, the name, and the price. We also don't need to use the use memo, and we can remove the card1 style. Now, inside of here, if we save it, we're of course going to get an error because we don't have this card style and all the data is static, but we want to show the dynamic data right now. So let's first fix all the errors, and we're going to start from top to bottom on fixing the styles. First, I'm going to remove this card1 style as we don't need it. Then we also have some image dimensions, which are on line 9. This here is going to be the IMG URL we're passing through props. Next, we have image dimensions ID on line 26. If I'm not mistaken, this whole div of different images is just for different amenities, such as for bathrooms, the square footage, and so on. So I think the first one is simply going to be an image of a car. So right here, we can do /car.svg, and we can remove the self-stretch from this div, as well as the relative from the image. Then we're going to have the image dimensions IDs 2, which is going to be bathtub. So again, just a string that's going to say bathtub.svg. And again, we can remove relative. Then we have image dimension values, which is going to be arrows out like this, indicating square footage. We can remove the relative. Then we're going to have our image dimension values 2, which is going to be /ellipse -1 at 2x.png. So this is just going to be a specific user icon. And of course, you don't have to know these values by heart, as I do right now. You can simply visit your icons, you can see the design, and figure out which icons do you need to add here, okay? We can also remove relative. And then for the next one, image dimension pairs, it's going to be /share network.svg. We can remove relative. And then we have two more. Image dimensions pair ID, which is going to be simply a heart icon. So / heart.svg. And then also the last one is going to be / plus.svg. And we can remove relative from both. There we go. Now, if we save this, we have one more, which is arrows out. Let's try to find where that is. There we go, here on square footage. It was supposed to be a string of / arrows out.svg. And now if we save it, hopefully it's going to become clear what I meant. We have the price, we have the car, we have the bathtub, and the square footage, and then the links for the share, like, and add. There we go. And now, the good thing is, these are the properties that are coming straight from Supabase. So we can expand that just a bit, so we can see 2 in a row. And this is looking magnificent, this time with the data that's coming from a dynamically fetched location or a database in the same UI that was generated for us from the design. Isn't that great? Wonderful. So with that said, the properties page, at least the fetching of the data, is more or less done. But of course, you can add so many additional features to it. So I'm going to go back out of the property card and property container. And here we said we're going to add some features for the default order. So at the top, on the default view, we can create a couple of objects. The first one having a key of a string of 1 and a label equal to a anchor tag that's going to say popular properties. And we're going to also give it an on-click that's going to have an event. And then it's going to say e.prevent default because we don't want it to reload the page once we click it. We can duplicate this 2 more times. 1, 2. Change the keys to 2 and 3. And then it's going to be latest properties as well as recommended properties. If we save that, and if you now hover, you can see all of these values right here. Of course, this part is not fully functional right now. I want you to keep working on this project and improve it even further. Create a new property details page. Try it out. Go to the Figma design, follow all the best practices, and design it. And then try to use Locofy one more time to test everything we went through right now, from steps 1 to steps 8, for Locofy to generate your property details page, and then you can add it to your code. That's the cool part. Now, with that said, you can also play with Supabase a bit to implement different filters or sorts, and you can also implement pagination, meaning only return a specific number of elements from Supabase. But other than that, we are done with the properties page. Now, let's go into the navbar a bit by closing all of the files and going to components and then navbar. Or it could be in the header, yep. And then here we have the Race real estate. So right here at the top, we can import link from next / link. We can turn this div, wrapping this to a link, and we can give it an href equal to /. So this is going to always lead us to home. So now if we click it, we go from properties to home. That's pretty cool. Again, you can also add additional functionalities for these properties right here, but we can quickly check out how did Locofy know to immediately add those predefined values. So let's search for New York, maybe, within the code, and we can see it right here among values. So we have a dropdown that has values of New York and Los Angeles, and this was created for us by just adding different values within Figma plugin. That's pretty cool. Of course, you can modify all of these things, and in some cases, you won't need many of these icons that you can see. So as I said, AI is here to be your friend, your assistant, your co-pilot, and it's here to optimize your workflow. And it did that significantly because we now have a complete design and you can focus just on adding the functionality. Just so we can move to the second page as well, let's make this rent button navigate to all properties. So that's going to be in the hero. And right here, we can change the router.push. You can see they already created the router.push for us, and it's going to go to properties. So if we save it and click not rent, but rather search, it navigates to properties. You can go back, and all of this is using the latest and greatest of what Next.js 13 has to offer. Now, let me show you one additional improvement that we can make. If you close all of these files and go back to Pages, Index.js on the homepage, remember, there we're also displaying a list of properties, which are these ones right here. And that's going to be under rent properties container, if I'm not mistaken. Here, right now, you can see that we are again going over all of these cards, which is not what we want to do. Now, one additional improvement that we can do is close all of these files and go to Pages, Index.js. And then within rent properties container, we don't have to pass all of these props to these cards anymore. You can do two things. You can display dynamic properties like we did on the properties page, or at least you can just pass the real props. So first of all, we can remove all of these props beside image dimensions from all of these cards, just to clean it up a bit. We have 4 cards right here. We can rename the image dimensions to simply img URL, and immediately that should show us the image. And finally, we can now select these empty spaces on all of these 4 cards and add 2 additional properties, such as name, which is equal to, let's do something like 92 Allium place, let's do Orlando, Florida, something like that, doesn't really matter. And then finally, you can pass the price as well, which can be something like 590,632. And we can replace the dot with a comma. Now, if we save this, you can see all of these values. That works correctly. And there we go. Now we're passing all of those values correctly, but we are yet to update the actual card. I think you can notice that the address as well as the price are still hard-coded. So within here, we can replace the price with simply the price coming from props, and we can replace the entire address with simply the address. Or I believe it's actually going to be name, not address. So let me see if I passed it correctly. Yep, it's going to be name, and we can save it. And now you can see the new values right here, the Orlando, and you can of course make this data dynamic. You can do absolutely whatever you want with it. This load more listing can easily point to the properties card. So you can easily turn this into a Next.js link and give it an href of /properties. Great. I think by this point you can completely understand what Locofy is all about. It is about increasing your speed. It's not replacing you as a developer. It's just giving you the entire design from Figma right in the code, and then you can make things work. So as I said, please include these locations, make these work, implement pagination for all of these properties, implement sorting and filtering. Heck, even make this hamburger menu work. The goal here is to take what has been given to you by Locofy for this specific design and then improve it. And it doesn't have to work for this design only. The point is, you can create a design or get a design from a designer and significantly speed up your workflow. With that said, the next logical step is to push all of the code that we have updated. You can see about 12 files changed, and then see how we can deploy it. So one thing I want to do is, first of all, add the .env to git ignore. We definitely don't want to push the env file, so we can say env and add it to here. And now we can simply push the changes by running the git add dot git commit -m. We can say make changes and then git push. This is going to push it to our repo. Now, before we officially deploy this project, I want to show you something pretty cool, and that is how Locofy can keep your design and code in sync. So here, we can go back to our Figma design. Now, within the design, we can reopen our plugin by going to Locofy Free Beta Plugin, and then we'll want to play with some styles. So let's say that we want to change the color of a button, but this can be any kind of change in your design. So we want to go to step 3, edit styling and layout, and we want to select a specific element, such as this search button right here. So we need to go to it. And let's say we want to change the color because that's really easily noticeable. So we can change it to this green color right here and then click done. And you can see the design immediately changed, but that makes sense, right? Now we want to sync it to Builder again to show you how it's going to get both the changes from our GitHub, but also the changes from the Figma design, and it's going to keep the two in sync. So let's click Sync to Builder, and let's do all frames, and click View Code in Builder. As before, this is going to take some time, maybe a bit less than before, but you can pause this video, and I'll be right back once everything is synced. And there we go. We can now view and export our code. So let's click View Code in Builder. And now we can go back to the landing page, and you can see that our search button is indeed green, which means there has been a change in the design that was recognized. But that makes sense, right? But now what about the code that we have created within our GitHub repository? To check that out, we can click the step 8, Sync, Export, and Deploy, and then click Sync Project with GitHub, the same as what we have done before. Now it's going to ask me to reconnect with GitHub one more time. There we go. We have connected successfully, and we can choose between a new repository or an existing one. In this case, I'm going to go with existing. And that's going to be, if I'm not mistaken, Locofy. Yep, real estate _ Locofy. It might be something different for you. And in this case, we want to select existing branch, and we want to choose the main branch and click Confirm Repo and Branch. Now, as you can see on the left side, we'll be able to load all of the code that we have on our GitHub, meaning everything we worked so hard on to fix, such as this new property card or the updated and simplified index.js and the properties page. But on the right side, you can see all of the components that have been modified, or rather that we modified, as well as everything else. In this case, we care only about two things. We care about the hero section, because that's what we modified within the design. We changed the color of this button right here to green. So now we can select this hero, and we can also select tailwind.config.js, and we can click Resolve Conflicts. Even though in this case, we just selected the hero and the tailwind, usually the best way to resolve all conflicts is just to click that Resolve Conflicts for All Files button. This is the best way to resolve conflicts because it's going to take all the files, as developers are sometimes unaware of the changes that the designer makes, so this is going to make sure that everybody's on the same page. I just wanted to let you know this so you know for future projects. And there we go. Now it figured out that before we were pushing to properties grid view, but now we're pushing to properties, which is the correct change. So I'm going to simply accept the GitHub change. And that is it for this file. But the most important question is the button blue or is it green? Well, let's check it out. In this case, we have the search button that has a BG medium C green. And this medium C green, I hope, is for AA15D. So if we go to the Tailwind config, we can see medium C green of 4AA15D, which is correct. That means that our hero has the latest changes from GitHub as well as the latest colors from Figma. This means that we can keep our design and code in sync. I don't think I've ever seen that before. You always have to have a developer go through the design, implement the changes in the code, and then have it deployed. But now you can do both at the same time. We can now complete the merge and push. There we go. It's pushing the project to GitHub. Let's give it a couple of minutes and hopefully it goes through. And there we go. Our project has been pushed to GitHub. We can go ahead and check out the repository. It is all on the main branch. We can immediately see that we have our first commit from Locofy Builder. It was for me 20 hours ago because I took a bit of a break of recording, but for you it should be a couple of hours ago. And then we have the changes that we have pushed from GitHub, which was the modifications to the original code. And finally, we can see that the components were modified just now from the design. This is the button color that we were talking about, which means that everything is working. Everything is synchronized. But now we're going to start with our last step, which is deployment, to actually see whether this button is going to be green or blue on our deployed site, and whether we'll be able to navigate through to the properties page. So to do that, let's deploy to one of the three options, such as Netlify, Vercel, and GitHub. Since we're working with Next.js, let's go with Vercel. Locofy allows you to select a starting point when you run your project, and for us, that's going to be the landing page. The deployment option is of course Vercel, and then we have to add our new token for the Vercel account and paste it here. The way to get to that account token is by going to your Vercel dashboard, and unfortunately, you're gonna see that my personal account was blocked because I just pushed so many projects, but thankfully I have the team account where we keep all of the projects from the masterclass, from our courses, and everything else. So this one is working. So to get to your token, you just click the top right where your profile is, and then you go to settings. Then you go to tokens, and here you can generate a new token. So let's create a new token name. It's going to be Locofy. Let's select a scope. It's going to be my organization. And then the expiration date can be whatever you prefer. In this case, let's do 1 year and click create. You're going to get a token. You can copy it, click done, go back to Locofy Builder, paste it here, and click save. And it seems like this token is invalid. It might be saying that because of the organization versus personal account problem that I explained before. So I'm going to paste another one right here, and I'm going to click save. And now the token was successfully added. For you, it should have worked for the first time. And now you can select deploy to a new project and click confirm deployment. And there we go, we're deploying. I really like these little animations. Everything is working so seamlessly. I gotta say, it's really intuitive. I like how they created 8 different steps. So steps 1 to 5 are right within your Figma editor. And then steps 5 to 8 are within Locofy Builder. Then you move to code, you implement the changes in code, and you come back and you deploy it right here immediately. So let's give this a couple more minutes to run, and then I'll be right back. And there we go, we are live. Unfortunately, we didn't get any confetti like we do on the Vercel website, but that could come in the future as well. So let's go ahead and click View Project, and we get this new, quite unique URL. And you can also see your website. It has the changes that are depicted right from the design. We can notice that by this green search button, but I hope it also has the changes that we've made from within our code base. So if we go to /properties, well, that didn't work. But no worries. This simply means that the name of the page exported by Locofy was adjusted from properties to properties grid view when we were doing the code merge. We're going to fix this later on. Our newest code right here that we deployed using Locofy is still using the version from Figma with the addition of the modified search. And you can see that by a couple of things. This was blue before. These buttons like rent and so on pointed to different cards. And these cards right here didn't point anywhere. And now they point to properties grid view instead of just /properties. So I'm actually really glad this happened, because Locofy pulled the most recent changes from Figma, but I want to show you that you still have access to your full code and you can deploy it however you want to. So let's go back to our code base. Yep, this is the one where we have the /properties page, and let's deploy it to Vercel manually. So from within the code base, you can go to your source control and then sync the changes, or on the bottom left, you can just pull the latest changes that came in, such as this green search button. Then you can go to your Vercel dashboard, add a new project. It's going to be the one from your GitHub repository. You can import it. Here, you can also add environment variables, which we must not miss because now we're working with real data from Supabase. So let's go to our .env. Copy them, and then simply paste them right here. That's going to add them right off the bat. And then we can simply click deploy. The reason why I wanted to show you this is because people are scared locking themselves into specific technologies. And I gotta be honest, that's for a reason. Sometimes these technologies take ownership of your code, but in Locofy's case, they just help you develop it. They help you simplify and speed up the process of developing boring parts of the website, which now AI does for you, but the code is under your full ownership. As you saw, you can deploy directly with them to Vercel, Netlify, or even better, you can export it as a zip or just sync it with your GitHub and then use it within your GitHub code and then do whatever you want with it, such as deploying it to our own Vercel project right away. So let's give it a couple more minutes, or it looks like it happened while I was speaking. So now we have some nice confetti. The project has been deployed to our new domain. We have our green search button, which means that the design and the code are fully connected. But now if we click it, it's going to point us to the properties page. It's not properties grid view, it's just properties, and it has 7 of them, the exact number that we have within our Supabase. So as I said, feel free to add a design for a project details page. Implement it. Go through all the same 8 steps for that new page and try to work it out. You're going to see how simple it is. If you have a great eye for design, this is going to be a tool that's going to significantly speed up your workflow. And if you don't, just try to find a designer. That's going to be helpful in any case to make your projects look better. Or browse the internet for hundreds of thousands of great Figma designs that have already been created and are looking for you to turn them to life. And this means that we've reached the end of the video. You've successfully transformed the Figma design into, first of all, the non-functional code, but then you added the functionality and hooked it up to a Supabase database. That's great. Of course, there are still some parts that can be optimized, such as this sorting, filtering, pagination, even the links and stuff like that. Feel free to play with it and dive deeper into all of these functionalities. So everything from the design that you can see right here was implemented. We had 2 great pages, but there's one recent thing that I want to mention that occurred in the world of design/development, and that is Figma's introduction of the dev mode. Right here, if you press Shift-D or toggle this on, it's going to turn on this development mode. And believe it or not, Locofy is supported by Figma right here as a part of their dev mode. So you can run it right here within their dev mode and explore a lot of different things. Let's see what we can do with it. So immediately you have the React settings or Next.js, and then you can choose whether you want TypeScript, JavaScript, CSS, whatever you want, it is possible. Apply it, and now preview a specific element. Let's preview this thing. First of all, right off the bat, it's pretty cool that you can explore the padding and the layout and everything. Figma gives you that. But what Locofy gives you, or rather Locofy in the new dev mode, believe it or not, it's all the code from these components immediately. So even if you don't want to do everything we've done in this video, kind of use Locofy to build the entire site, you can just hop onto any design whatsoever, select a specific element, such as this card right here, and immediately get its code. The TSX, the CSS, the Tailwind config, any other configuration. Can be JavaScript, TypeScript, style components. You immediately get the code, and you can even optimize it. So if you click here, you can optimize the design, which is the process we've gone through, or you can just download the code with one single click in a zip file. This, I gotta say, is pretty cool, and I'm really happy that Figma, first of all, is moving towards being more flexible for developers. But at the same time, I'm really happy to see Locofy as being one of the first ever officially supported plugins for Figma within the dev mode. With that said, I want to thank Locofy not only for sponsoring this video, but for creating such a phenomenal tool for designers and developers. And I want to thank you for coming to the end of this video and building such a fantastic project and learning more about how developers can produce software faster and better with the help of AI. And hopefully you're not as scared as before that AI is going to replace us. And if you like this video, and hopefully you did because you're watching this right now at the end of this video, you're gonna like even more what we do within the JSM Masterclass experience. There, you can graduate in 6 months, land your dream job with the support of our expert mentors, or get a full refund. There, we're gonna build even more phenomenal projects, and the only thing it takes is you can start the admission process, take a 10-minute quiz, and figure out whether this is for you. It's a big difference having these projects in your portfolio than having some generic bootcamp ones. So with that said, once again, thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.